Hello everyone, we're more than halfway through July and the results for the 3-card blind tournament are up on the website. They've actually been up for a few days now, but the reason I hadn't made a video is I anticipated that I may have made errors on calculating the match outcomes, and that was correct. I've relied a lot on the folks in the Discord to help make sure that I'm getting these match outcomes correct, and at this point I have every reason to believe that the outcomes are all correct. That being said, the way that I have the data flow set up, it's very easy for me to make amendments. So if you want to look through your own match history or other players' match histories, you can do that at any time and let me know if you think there's an error. And this isn't a time-sensitive issue either. You can go as far back as the website provides, so you can look as far back as August to see if there were errors made back then, and it's very easy for me to make those adjustments. So don't hesitate to join the Discord and get involved with that if you'd like. And also, as a reminder, the Discord is a great place for you to learn about the format and participate in side events while you wait for the main event to become available again. Let's start things off by looking at an overall meta breakdown of what was played in July. Let's start by mentioning that with Chancellor of the Annex gone and on the ban list, Black Lotus was free real estate for everybody to build whatever kind of deck they wanted to, and that played a very significant role in sculpting the meta. I think a fair way to discuss the meta is to divide the decks submitted into 5 different categories. The first category I would call Lotus decks, decks that try to use Black Lotus for its intended purpose and put out some kind of significant threat using that fast mana. The next category would be Leyline of Anticipation decks, and these had a common trend. They use Leyline of Anticipation to be able to deploy their own Black Lotus before the other player, and then rely on the third card as a form of disruption to potentially shut off the opponent's Lotus or their strategy entirely. The third category would be Force of Will decks, and that falls into 2 different types of Force of Will decks. The first is Force of Will plus miscellaneous blue card plus something that makes a free 1/1 creature. And the other type of Force of Will deck was the Force of Will Storage Land Mist Hollow Griffin deck. And the former of these 2 was by far the more popular one, but they both played a significant role as decks that can shut off Black Lotus very easily. The fourth category of deck would be Gideon decks, and these decks are very, very strong on the play and still pretty powerful even when they go second. They use Black Lotus to play Gideon of the Trials, then use Gideon of the Trials' ability to create an emblem that prevents you from losing the game, which lets you leverage Pact of Negation without ever having to pay for that 5 cost, because the emblem will protect you from losing the game. The final category of decks would be the miscellaneous decks. They notably did not use Black Lotus, and also did not lean into using instant speed disruption to deal with their opponent's strategies. The matches this month were broken up into 3 groups of players, Group A, B, and C. Because the overwhelming majority of players were new this month, these pods didn't look that different from each other, but they were loosely broken up by player elo. So Group A did include our players from prior months that had an established elo that was greater than 1500, but even within Group A, the majority of players were new players at 1500 elo. Let's start by looking at our winners for Pod C, and that was Silas and Deck Tricks and Ravens, and they were both using the same deck, which was Chancellor of the Forge, Force of Will, and Misdirection. So this falls under that category of Force of Will decks that I mentioned earlier that produce a free 1/1 and then rely on Force of Will to disrupt the opponent's strategy. The reason that Silas and Deck Tricks and Ravens performed slightly better than some of the other Force of Will decks is that Misdirection offered an advantage in a specific matchup, which was against a Blackmail the Rack deck submitted by MTG Man. In this matchup, MTG Man would like to play Blackmail first to bait out the Force of Will, which in other matches where Misdirection isn't involved is a great way to bait out the Force of Will. But in this matchup, The misdirection allows you to turn that blackmail back on MTG Man and make sure that they can't play the rack regardless of which order they play their cards in. Let's jump to Pod B. The winner of Group B was Captain Chicken, and Captain Chicken submitted that Black Lotus Gideon of the Trials Pact of Negation deck. Interestingly, Captain Chicken performed better than other players that submitted this list. The reason for that, frankly, is just luck. The pods were randomized, and Captain Chicken happened to end up in a pod where the deck performed slightly better. There were a number of players in Pod A that played the same deck, and they all performed reasonably well, but slightly worse than how Captain Chicken performed just because of how things were randomized. That is admittedly a flaw of splitting things into groups. However, that flaw will become less of an issue as more games get played, because then players will be segregated into groups based off of their elo as opposed to randomly. And in our Group A pod, Mirror Metal came in first again with a very interesting list. And that list was Cavern of Souls, Hexdrinker, and then the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. I think there's a lot of really compelling things to discuss here. First, I think it's really interesting that Mirror Metal was able to come in first 2 months consecutively. I believe this not only indicates that Mirror Metal is a very skilled player who has a very deep understanding of the format, but I think it also lends towards proving that the format itself has some legitimate validity, that there is a skill involved in this format that you can learn and get better at. And right now, Mirror Metal is really paving the way in terms of consistent success. As far as how the deck interacts with other decks that were played this month, each of the individual cards operates as a piece that overcomes one of the other decks. So Cavern of Souls does an excellent job of making sure that those Pact of Negations and Force of Wills don't affect Mirror Metal. The Hexdrinker does an excellent job of just being a threat that can grow very large, but notably that protection from everything, claws, and the speed at which it grows is significant enough that it can outrace Gideon and kill Gideon before Gideon is able to kill you. And then the last card in the deck, of course, is the Tabernacle. And the Tabernacle performs incredibly well into decks that are using Black Lotus as its primary mana source. That the Tabernacle, if a player is relying on a creature to win the game, they can't win the game if they don't have a reliable mana source to pay for the Tabernacle. Just by including the Tabernacle, Mirror Metal managed to mitigate a lot of losses. Mirror Metal only lost 3 games, and that's largely because the Tabernacle is very good at forcing draws in a lot of situations. I think a takeaway from this month is that banning Chancellor of the Annex was a really great and healthy thing for the format. This month had such a wide diversity of interesting decks that I don't think we really have time to go into all of them today. So in the interest of keeping the video short and sweet, we're gonna wrap things up. In the aftermath of the results for July, we are looking at what cards might be appropriate to ban or not ban for the month of August. That discussion is happening in the Discord, and it's really interesting seeing all of the different perspectives that people have. If you're not already part of the Discord, I really recommend that you get involved. Frankly, it's been astounding how many great people have joined. The discussions are lively and fun, and it's been a privilege to be a part of them. I'm looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts on the match results, as well as hearing what you think about should there be bans and what should those bans be for the month of August. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon.